My name is Clara Pierce, I'm 38 years old, and my family tried to ban me from a hotel, not realizing I secretly owned the entire chain. Before I tell you how my own father's penthouse keycard flashed red, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Thank you for being here, and I hope you're having a good day. Please comment and let me know what city you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to that afternoon in Chicago. The lobby of the Serenity Crest Grand was my sanctuary. It was the heart of the empire I had built from nothing, a testament to 2 decades of sleepless nights and relentless work. Every detail, from the soft amber glow of the chandeliers to the faint scent of white tea and cedarwood in the air, was designed to soothe, to welcome, to promise a respite from the chaos of the world. But on that Tuesday, chaos had found its way in. I was standing by the grand staircase, speaking quietly with my head of operations, when I heard the voice. It was a voice I could recognize anywhere, loud, booming, and dripping with an unearned sense of importance. It cut through the quiet hum of the lobby like a rusty saw. "I don't think you understand," the voice boomed. "I am Richard Pierce. I am here for the Pinnacle Summit. I was personally invited. The penthouse suite. Now." My blood ran cold. I turned slowly, my heart a heavy stone in my chest. There he was. My father. He hadn't changed a bit. The same expensive but slightly too tight suit, the same self-important posture, the same sneer on his face as he looked down his nose at the young woman at the front desk. Behind him, looking both embarrassed and entitled, stood my mother, Margaret, and my older brother, Leo. The whole family. The front desk manager, Michael, a man I trusted implicitly, was already moving to intervene. I gave him a subtle shake of my head. "I'll handle this." I watched for a moment as my father continued his tirade. He was waving a printout of an email, jabbing his finger at it. The invitation came from the summit's benefactor. An anonymous donor who clearly understands my value. "Now, are you going to get me my key, or do I have to buy this entire hotel and fire you myself?" The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I walked toward them, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The sound was deliberate, measured. Each step was a reminder of how far I had come from the girl they had cast aside. "Is there a problem here?" I asked, my voice even in calm. My father turned, annoyed by the interruption. He gave me a quick, dismissive once-over, his eyes cataloging my simple, elegant dress and dismissing me as just another guest. "This doesn't concern you, miss," he snapped, waving a hand in my direction. "We're dealing with management. Or what passes for it in this place." My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Leo, however, just smirked, that same cruel smirk he'd worn the day he destroyed my future. I looked past my father to the young woman at the desk. Her name was Sarah. She was pale but holding her composure beautifully. I gave her a small, reassuring nod. Then, I turned my full attention back to the man who had never once believed in me. The man who had actively tried to tear me down. The man who was now standing in the center of my world, trying to do the same thing to a stranger. I let the silence stretch for a moment, the entire lobby seeming to hold its breath. I met his gaze, holding it until he started to look uncomfortable, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "On the contrary," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It concerns me very much. Tell me, Dad, don't you recognize your own daughter?" The drive to Denver General felt like falling through ice. Every stoplight, every car that pulled out in front of me was a personal assault, a thief stealing precious seconds. I left my car crooked in a spot marked for doctors and ran, my purse slapping against my hip, my lungs burning in the thin Colorado air. The ICU was a world of hushed beeps and quiet efficiency. A nurse guided me to a room at the end of the hall, her expression a careful mixture of pity and professionalism. Before we went in, a doctor intercepted us. He was young, with tired eyes that had seen too much. "Mrs. Thompson," he said gently. "I'm Dr. Evans. We've been trying to reach your husband. He's out of town." I cut him off, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. What's wrong with my son? What's happened to Leo? Dr. Evans's face softened with a sorrow that confirmed my worst fears. Leo was brought in 2 weeks ago with severe abdominal pain. I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, he has an extremely aggressive form of stomach cancer. It's metastasized to his liver and lymph nodes. Carol, it's terminal. We're just trying to keep him comfortable now. Terminal. The word didn't compute. It was a clinical, sterile word for something that was about to rip my life apart. We called the emergency contact number multiple times, he continued, his voice low. Your husband answered the first few times, said he was handling it, that Leo just needed rest. After that, our calls went straight to voicemail. He was handling it. My husband was handling it by taking my sister to a luxury resort while my son was dying. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, an anger so pure and so deep it felt like it would never go away. But that could wait. Leo couldn't. I pushed the door open and the world narrowed to the man in the bed. He was so small. My son, who was always so full of life, so tall and strong, seemed to have shrunk beneath the thin hospital blanket. His skin was sallow, his cheeks hollowed out. Wires and tubes snaked from his body, tethering him to the machines that sang the quiet, steady rhythm of his decline. I walked to his side and touched his hand. It was cool. I wrapped my fingers around his, willing my own warmth, my own life force, into him. Leo? I whispered, my voice cracking. Honey, it's Mom. I'm here. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, they opened, and his tired hazel eyes found mine. A flicker of the boy I knew was still there. Mom? His voice was a dry rasp. You came home. Of course I came home, I said, tears streaming down my face now. I leaned in, brushing the hair off his forehead. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. I should have been here. He tried to shake his head, a tiny, weak movement. Not your fault. You were working. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Always so proud of you, Mom. It felt like a punch to the gut. All those years, I'd worked to provide, to give him and Robert a life of comfort, to build a legacy. I was the primary breadwinner, the one whose salary paid for the big house, the nice cars, the life Robert claimed as his own. And for what? To be absent when it mattered most? I love you, Leo, I sobbed, holding his hand to my cheek. I love you so much. I know, he whispered, his eyes starting to drift shut. Love you too. He squeezed my hand, a faint pressure that was everything. Tell Dad, he trailed off, too tired to finish. Don't worry about that now, I murmured, my heart breaking. Just rest. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I sat with him for what felt like an eternity and no time at all. I held his hand, humming the same lullaby I'd sung to him when he was a little boy with a fever. I watched the numbers on the monitor, not understanding them but knowing they were a clock counting down the end of my world. And then, just after sunset, the steady beeping stopped. It was replaced by a single, long, piercing tone. A sound I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. His hand went limp in mine. The room was suddenly full of nurses and the quiet, urgent voice of Dr. Evans. Someone gently guided me out into the hallway. I stood there, leaning against the cool wall, as the sounds of a life ending played out behind the closed door. My son was gone. And I had come home too late. The hours after Leo's death were a blur of sterile white rooms and quiet, pitying voices. I signed papers. I answered questions. I moved through the motions like a ghost, a hollow shell of the woman who had walked off a plane that morning, full of hope. I drove home to a house that was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. The silence was deafening, thick with the absence of my son. I walked through the rooms, touching his things, the worn-out baseball glove on his desk, the half-finished book on his nightstand. Each object was a fresh stab of pain. The numbness held me for a day. It was a cold, protective blanket. But on the second day, the anger started to burn through. It started as a low hum, a need to know. I walked into the home office, the one I had designed but Robert mostly used. On the desk was a stack of mail. I started opening it, my hands steady. And there it was. The first piece of the puzzle. A credit card statement for our joint account. My name was on it, but I hadn't used this card in months. Robert had. My eyes scanned the list of charges. And then I saw it. A charge from 5 days ago. The Aspen Ridge Resort and Spa, for $1,800. Another charge from the same day, Monarch Steakhouse, Aspen, $650. And another, Aspen Jewelers, $2,200. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. While I was in Chicago working on a new project that would fund our comfortable life, while our son was lying alone in a hospital bed, my husband and my sister were on a luxury vacation. They were dining on expensive steaks and buying jewelry. My fingers went numb. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Susan's name. I didn't call. I went to her social media page. Her profile was public, a curated gallery of her perfect life. And there, posted 4 days ago, was a picture of her and Robert. They were on a balcony, snow-capped mountains in the background, glasses of champagne in their hands. He was smiling. She was laughing, her head thrown back. And around her neck was a delicate, sparkling diamond necklace I had never seen before. The caption read, "Best weekend getaway ever with my favorite person." Feeling so blessed. I was floored. The blatant, shameless cruelty of it all stole my breath. I threw the phone onto the desk. Blessed. She felt blessed. My own sister. I had helped her through a messy divorce, given her a loan to start her own business, let her stay in our guest room for 6 months. And this was how she repaid me. The anger was white-hot now. I picked up my phone and dialed Robert's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice breezy and annoyed. "Carol? What is it?" "I'm a little busy." "Busy?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I'm sure you are." "I'm at home, Robert." There was a pause. "Oh. You're back early. Is everything okay?" "No, Robert, everything is not okay," I said, the words like ice chips. "Leo is dead." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I heard a faint shuffling sound, maybe him covering the phone. When he spoke again, his voice was a poor imitation of grief. "Oh my God. Carol. I don't know what to say." "When did it happen?" "Last night," I said flatly. "While you were busy." "Funny, I didn't know Aspen was on your business itinerary." "Listen, Carol, it's not what you think," he started, the defensive tone creeping in. "Susan and I, we just needed to get away, to clear our heads. We were worried sick about Leo." "You were so worried you bought her a $2,000 necklace?" I shot back. "That's not fair," he sputtered. "You're the one who's never here. Always working, always on some business trip. I'm the one who had to deal with all of this. You have no idea what it's been like." He was blaming me. He was actually blaming me. I felt a laugh, a bitter, broken sound, bubble up in my throat. I hung up. I couldn't listen to another word. A moment later, my phone buzzed. A text from Susan. "Don't blame Robert. He's been under so much stress. Maybe if you were around more, you'd understand. Leo always liked me better anyway." I actually listened to him. That was it. That was the moment the grief turned into something harder. Something colder. Something that would fuel me through the war that was coming. My eyes scanned the messy office, and I saw it. Leo's tablet, sitting on the corner of the desk, covered in a thin layer of dust. He used it for everything: his sketches, his notes, his life. I picked up his tablet, my fingers trembling as I wiped away the dust. The screen lit up, asking for a password. And in that moment, I knew. I knew this was what Leo had left for me. This was the key. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're with me on this journey. Your support is a tremendous encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1 and listen as I tell you the rest of my story. My fingers hovered over the screen of Leo's tablet. A password. My mind raced through possibilities: his dog's name, his favorite baseball team, the street we used to live on. Then, a thought, so simple and so painful, struck me. I typed in the numbers. My own birthday. The screen unlocked. My breath hitched. Of course. Even in the end, he was thinking of me. I opened his journal app, and the world fell away. I sat in that dusty office chair all night, the only light coming from the glow of the screen, and I read. I read as my son chronicled the last few months of his life. It wasn't just a journal, it was an indictment. October 12th, the stomach pain is back. Dad said it was just indigestion, told me to take some Tums. He seemed annoyed that I was complaining. October 28th, threw up after dinner. Aunt Susan was here. She and Dad just looked at each other. She told me I was probably just looking for attention because Mom was away on her Chicago trip. November 5th, I think there's something going on with Dad and Aunt Susan. I saw them in the kitchen last night when they thought I was asleep. He was holding her hand. It felt wrong. I feel so alone. November 16th, my appointment with Dr. Miller was today. Dad was supposed to take me. He texted an hour before, said his car wouldn't start and he couldn't get a ride. He told me to reschedule. I know he was lying. I heard him on the phone with Susan earlier, laughing. The entries went on, a meticulous, heartbreaking record of neglect and betrayal. He wrote about overheard whispers, about his father forgetting to pick up his pain medication, about the way they would leave him alone for hours to go out to dinner. He had even screenshotted texts he'd seen on his father's phone, flirtatious, cruel messages between Robert and Susan, complaining about having to babysit a sick kid. By the time the sun started to rise, casting pale gray light into the room, I had finished. The tears had dried on my face. The grief was still there, a giant, gaping hole in my soul. But it was now surrounded by a wall of ice. I knew what I had to do. I backed up the entire diary to a secure cloud drive and emailed a copy to myself. Evidence. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't call Robert. I didn't call Susan. I called David Chin. David was an old friend from college, now one of the sharpest divorce and estate lawyers in Denver. He answered on the first ring, his voice warm with sleep. Carol? It's 6 a.m. Is everything okay? No, David. Nothing is okay, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. Leo passed away. Oh, Carol, no. I'm so sorry. I didn't even know he was sick. What can I do? I need you to do something for me. Right now, I said. I am the primary earner in this household. My salary funds everything. My name is on every account, every asset, alongside Robert's. I need you to file an emergency petition. I need you to freeze everything. Every joint checking account, every savings account, every credit card. Shut it all down. I want him to have access to nothing. There was a moment of silence. David was a good lawyer, he knew the legal complexities. But he was also a good friend. He could hear the steel in my voice. "Consider it done, Carol," he said simply. "I'll have the paperwork filed by 9 a.m. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied, and hung up. I sat there in the silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. I didn't move for 3 hours. At 10:17 a.m., my phone rang. It was Robert. I let it go to voicemail. He called back immediately. I let it ring. He called a third time, a fourth, a fifth. On the sixth call, I answered and put the phone on speaker, letting it sit on the desk in front of me. "What did you do?" he screamed, his voice a distorted howl of pure rage. "My card was just declined. At the gas station. They said the account is frozen. Susan's card too. What the hell did you do, Carol?" I said nothing. "Are you listening to me?" he shrieked. "This is my money too. You can't just do this. I have a lawyer. You will regret this, I swear to God." I listened to him scream, to his threats, to his panicked, pathetic rage. He wasn't grieving our son. He was grieving his bank account. When he finally paused to take a breath, I reached over and calmly ended the call. The first shot had been fired. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that it had hit its mark. The quiet satisfaction of that phone call lasted for exactly 48 hours. It was a cold, bitter comfort in a house that felt too big, too quiet. I spent those 2 days making the first, awful arrangements for my son's funeral, moving through a fog of checklists and somber conversations. I thought, naively, that Robert and Susan would be too busy scrambling for money to bother me. I was wrong. The doorbell rang on the third day. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a cheap suit holding a thick manila envelope. My stomach tightened. A process server. I opened the door and took the envelope without a word. My hands were shaking as I tore it open, right there in the entryway. It was a court filing. An emergency petition. Filed by Robert Thompson and Susan Miller against Carol Thompson. I scanned the pages, and the words blurred into a stream of legal poison. They were accusing me. They claimed my grief had made me mentally and emotionally unstable. They alleged that my decision to freeze our assets was an erratic and punitive action that proved I was not fit to manage the estate. They were petitioning the court to grant Robert temporary conservatorship over all marital assets, including the house. My house. But it was the sworn affidavits at the back that made me feel like I was going to be sick. They were personal declarations, signed by my husband and my sister, under penalty of perjury. Robert's statement painted a picture of me as a cold, career-obsessed woman who was never home. An absent, workaholic mother who had outsourced her parental duties. He claimed he was the primary caregiver, the one who had sacrificed his own career to manage the household and Leo's needs. He wrote that my sudden, aggressive actions were proof of a complete mental breakdown. Susan's was even worse. She described herself as the loving aunt who had stepped in to fill the void left by a neglectful mother. She detailed conversations she claimed to have had with Leo, where he confessed his loneliness and his feeling that his own mother didn't care about him. She twisted my love for my work into a weapon, portraying it as a selfish ambition that came at the expense of my family. It was a masterpiece of cruelty. A carefully constructed narrative designed to hit me where I was most vulnerable. Because deep down, under all the anger, there was a kernel of guilt. Had I worked too much? Had I missed moments I shouldn't have? They knew my insecurities. And they were using them to try and destroy me, to take everything. I sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, the papers scattered around my feet. For the first time since Leo had died, I felt a tremor of fear. They were coming for my home. They were trying to take my inheritance, the money I had earned. But worse, they were trying to take my story, to rewrite history and paint me as the villain. They were trying to desecrate the memory of my relationship with my son. Could they actually win? The thought was terrifying. They were 2 against 1. They would lie on the stand, their faces masks of sincere grief, and they would tell the world that I was crazy. My phone rang. It was David, my lawyer. "Carol, I just saw the filing. It's garbage. Don't let it get to you." "They're saying I'm unstable, David," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They're using my work, my career, they're twisting everything." "Of course they are," he said, his voice firm and reassuring. "It's what desperate people do. It's a classic legal tactic, designed to throw you off balance, to make you emotional, to make you doubt yourself. Don't fall for it. They have no idea what we have. They think this is a battle of opinions. They don't know we have the truth." His words were a lifeline. I took a deep breath, the cold air steadying me. He was right. This wasn't a personal attack to grieve over. This was a tactical maneuver. And I knew how to handle tactical maneuvers. "When is the hearing?" I asked, my voice stronger now. "Next Tuesday," he replied. "Be ready, Carol. They're going to throw everything they have at you." I looked down at the lies scattered across my floor. I thought of my son's words in his diary. I thought of his face in that hospital bed. The fear receded, replaced by that familiar, cold resolve. "Let them," I said. "I'll be ready." The courtroom was cold and impersonal, all polished wood and somber lighting that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air. I sat beside David at our table, my back ramrod straight, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across the room, Robert and Susan sat with their lawyer. They were dressed for a funeral. Robert wore a dark, conservative suit, his face a mask of dignified sorrow. Susan was in a simple black dress, a tissue clutched in her hand, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly, artfully red-rimmed. They looked like the very picture of grief. Their lawyer, a slick man with silver hair named Peterson, went first. He spoke in a low, sympathetic tone, painting a tragic picture for the judge. He described a family shattered by loss, and a grieving mother who, in her pain, had lashed out irrationally. He used words like erratic, unstable, and compromised judgment. He portrayed Robert and Susan as the stable, responsible parties, trying only to protect the family's assets, and me, from my own destructive grief. Then Robert took the stand. His performance was flawless. His voice cracked as he spoke about Leo. He talked about their father-son bond, about the private moments he'd shared with him in his final weeks. He looked at me with pity in his eyes. "I love my wife," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "But she hasn't been herself since this happened. She's not thinking clearly. This isn't about money. It's about protecting what's left of our family. It's what Leo would have wanted." Susan followed him. She was even better. Tears streamed down her face as she described being Leo's confidant. "He would call me, crying," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He'd say he felt so alone. His mom was always working, always on a plane. I just tried to be there for him." She looked directly at the judge. "My sister is a brilliant architect, but she wasn't always a present mother." Freezing the accounts, it was just the final, desperate act of a woman consumed by guilt. I sat there and listened to it all. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just held my gaze steady, my face a blank mask. I could feel the judge's eyes on me, assessing me. I knew what she was seeing, a cold, emotionless woman, just as they had described. When Peterson was finished, the judge turned to my lawyer. "Mr. Chen? Your response?" David stood up, calm and methodical. "Your Honor, we agree that this is a tragedy. But the narrative you have just heard is a work of fiction. A cruel and self-serving one. Mr. Peterson has built his case on the opinions and feelings of his clients. I, however, prefer to deal in facts. And I have testimony from a witness who knew the truth of this situation better than anyone. Peterson shot to his feet. Objection. The witness list is closed. This witness was unable to be here in person, David continued smoothly, ignoring him. But he left behind a sworn, detailed, and dated testimony. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to read from the personal diary of Leo Thompson. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Robert's face went white. Susan's hand flew to her mouth. The judge looked intrigued. Proceed, Mr. Chin. David opened a binder on the lectern. Inside were the printed pages from Leo's diary. And he began to read. He read Leo's entry about his father and aunt laughing on the phone while he was in pain. He read the entry about Robert lying so he could skip a doctor's appointment to be with Susan. He read Leo's heartbroken words about seeing them hold hands in the kitchen. With each entry, the story they had so carefully constructed crumbled to dust. The air in the room grew thick with their lies. Then David arrived at the final, damning entries. From November 29th, Your Honor, he said, his voice clear and steady. Dad was supposed to give me my pain meds at 8 p.m. He and Aunt Susan were drinking wine in the living room. I reminded him twice. He said in a minute. He never came back. I was in so much pain I couldn't sleep. David paused, letting the words hang in the silent room. And from December 2nd, just 3 days before he was taken to the hospital by an ambulance a neighbor had to call, I feel so sick. So weak. I think Dad is seeing Susan as a way to get Mom's money after, you know. I heard him on the phone with her. He said, once Carol's inheritance from her parents is officially in the joint estate, and once the kid is gone, we'll be set. They're not waiting for me to die. They're waiting for a payday. A collective gasp went through the small gallery. The judge's face was a mask of cold fury. She looked from the pages in David's hand to the two people at the other table. It was over. Robert started stammering, pointing a shaking finger at Susan. It was her idea. She was always talking about money, about Carol's salary, the inheritance. Liar! Susan shrieked, her mask of grief replaced by a snarl of pure panic. You're the one who said Carol owed us. You said you deserved it for putting up with her for 30 years. They were rats in a trap, turning on each other. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a vast, empty sadness. David closed the binder. We have nothing further, Your Honor. The judge looked at Robert and Susan with utter contempt. Petition for conservatorship is denied, with prejudice. The temporary freeze on all joint assets will be made permanent pending divorce proceedings and a full forensic accounting of this estate. And I am instructing the court clerk to deliver a transcript of this hearing, specifically the testimony of Leo Thompson, to the district attorney's office. I believe they will find it very interesting. This hearing is adjourned. The days following the court hearing were a blur of quiet victory and profound exhaustion. The story of Robert and Susan's spectacular implosion on the stand spread quickly. The district attorney's office did indeed find the transcript interesting, and a criminal investigation for fraud and medical neglect was opened. My divorce proceedings began, a clean, swift process now that Robert had no leverage and no fight left in him. But all of that felt like background noise. My focus was on one thing, giving my son the farewell he deserved. The funeral was held on a crisp, clear Colorado morning. I had expected a small gathering, a few family friends, some of my colleagues. I was not prepared for the crowd that filled the chapel to overflowing. They spilled out into the foyer, standing respectfully along the walls. I didn't know half of them. They were clients of the architectural firm where Leo had worked as a junior designer. They were old high school friends I'd never met. They were neighbors from blocks away. Each one came up to me, their eyes filled with genuine sadness, and shared a small story. Leo helped me design a wheelchair ramp for my mother's house, and he wouldn't take a penny for the plans. Leo always stopped to say hello to my dog on his morning run. Leo was just a good man. But it was one group that truly took my breath away. Near the front sat about a dozen teenagers, looking awkward and out of place in their Sunday best. After the service, a man in his 40s with a kind, weary face approached me. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, extending a hand. "My name is Marcus. I run the Northwood Youth Center downtown. These are some of our kids. They insisted on coming to pay their respects." I looked at him, confused. The youth center? I didn't know Leo was involved. Marcus smiled, a sad, warm expression. "That sounds like Leo. He never talked about it much. He just showed up. For the last 3 years, he came every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. He wasn't just a volunteer, he was our most dedicated mentor. He tutored these kids in math, helped them with their college applications, taught a free class on graphic design. He changed their lives." One by one, the kids came forward, shyly offering their condolences. A young girl named Maya showed me a drawing on her phone, a beautiful, professional-looking logo for a small business she wanted to start. "Leo taught me how to do this," she said quietly. "He told me I had a real eye for design." A tall boy named Jamal shook my hand. "Leo helped me write my college essay. He spent hours with me on it. He's the reason I got a scholarship to study engineering. He believed in me when no one else did." I stood there, listening to their stories, and I felt a shift inside me. All this time, I had been fighting a war against the people who had hurt my son. I was so focused on the ugliness of his death that I hadn't truly seen the beauty of his life. His legacy wasn't in a cold courtroom or a frozen bank account. It wasn't in the house I had designed or the inheritance I had protected. His true legacy was right here, standing in front of me. It was in the future of a young artist, in the ambition of a future engineer, in the quiet confidence of a dozen kids from a rough neighborhood who now had a chance because my son had taken the time to care. The anger I had carried for weeks began to recede, replaced by a wave of immense, heartbreaking pride. They hadn't won. Robert and Susan, with all their greed and cruelty, hadn't managed to touch the part of Leo that truly mattered. That part was immortal. It was living and breathing in the hopes and dreams of these children. And in that moment, I knew my fight wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter. The weeks after the funeral were different. The legal battles faded into the background, handled efficiently by David. The criminal case against Robert and Susan was moving forward, but I found I no longer followed it with the same intensity. My focus had shifted. I spent my days at the Northwood Youth Center, talking with Marcus, meeting the kids, and listening. I learned that their building was old, their funding was scarce, and their dreams were bigger than their resources. Leo had known this. Marcus showed me sketches he'd found in Leo's old locker at the center, preliminary designs for a new, expanded facility, full of light and space and hope. He had been planning to help them. It was his unfinished business. One evening, I was sitting in the quiet, empty house that now felt more like a museum than a home. It was filled with 3 decades of memories, but the painful ones were starting to outweigh the good. I realized that clinging to these walls was like clinging to a ghost. My life with Robert was over. My life as Leo's mother had changed forever. To move forward, I needed to let go. The decision, when it came, felt simple and right. I put the house on the market. The house I had poured my heart into, the symbol of the life I thought I had built. I took the considerable proceeds from the sale, combined with my share of the marital assets and the inheritance from my parents that Robert had coveted, and I made a new plan. It took a year. A year of planning, of architectural designs, of navigating city permits and contractors. I poured all my grief, all my anger, and all my love for my son into a single project. Last month, we had the grand opening. It's a beautiful, modern building of glass and warm wood on a quiet street downtown. It has a state-of-the-art computer lab, an art studio, a music room, and a library filled with books. Over the front doors, in clean, simple letters, it reads, Leo's House, a Northwood Youth Center. My life is different now. I don't design skyscrapers anymore. I run the foundation that funds the center. I sit on the board. Sometimes, I even help the kids with their math homework. Robert and Susan took a plea deal, they're serving time for fraud. I rarely think about them. They are a closed chapter in a book I no longer read. My new life is here, in the sound of laughter echoing down a hallway, in the sight of a teenager's face lighting up when they finally solve a difficult problem. My son's life was cut short by cruelty and neglect, but his spirit, his kindness, his generosity, his belief in others, is more alive now than ever. They tried to take everything from me, but in the end, they gave me the one thing I never knew I needed, a purpose beyond myself. They thought they were waiting for a payday, but my son, my beautiful boy, left behind a different kind of inheritance. And it's a legacy that will never run out. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but sharing it has been a part of my healing. If you've ever faced a betrayal that felt impossible to overcome, what gave you the strength to move forward? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Please, if you found any part of this story meaningful, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know. Thank you again.